Well, at least Porsche can say they're having a better week than Jordan Henderson is. Welcome back to Motorsport 101. That's one for you football fans out there. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 494 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison. And look, we're going to be honest with you here, listeners. Formula E did have their season opener in Mexico City this past weekend. We are reviewing this episode. We're not going to lie, folks. This is going to be a difficult one. Not for the reasons you'd expect. This was not a classic. And I remember our guest literally liked a tweet of mine on Saturday night when this race went down that I said, and I quote, "Good luck to the video editors creating a 5-minute highlight reel out of this one."
Got just about, 5:09 out of it and no more. And that was stretching it.
They had to squeeze every drop out of that to get to. I think they're mandated to have a 5-minute highlight reel. So we gave you 5 minutes and the change, like the tip, the 9-second tip at the end, just to make sure. In case you didn't hear that already, that was the voice of Mr. Cam Buckley. How's it going, Cam?
We qualified the car. Let's go.
Yeah, at least one Porsche entirely didn't shit the bed out of the 4 that was on the track this weekend, because Pascal Wehrlein would dominate the proceedings to take a pretty comfortable win. Like, Pascal Wehrlein seemingly turns into Ayrton Senna, but only in the country of Mexico. It's a strange vibe, but it seems to work for him.
Yeah, it's like the sped up bass boosted Senna meme you see on Twitter sometimes. Like every time Charles Leclerc loses a front wing end plate.
just becomes God mode all of a sudden. It's a weird vibe, but here we are. Also, joining us, we got him back because it's a Formula E episode, and I felt like, why not at this point? Because RJ is currently flying to Daytona as we speak. We're not jealous of him in any way, shape, or form. No, not entirely. But the good news is we do have Sasha Garlick coming back on the show for 2 weeks in a row. Sash, good to have you back, man.
Hey there, Dre. It's great to be back here again. And I tell you what, you said something there, Cam, about Porsche qualified the car, and somehow it just made me think of the meme Shinji get back in the robot, and a bit like an episode of Neon Genesis Evangelion. This Formula E race gave me lots of impressive tableaus, and it gave me the chance to ponder my own existence a lot. And the most exciting thing I did this past weekend was I bought this classic majorette Toyota 2000 GT from my local supermarket.
Nice.
Yeah.
A certified hood classic to 2000 GT.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I'm glad that at least you were able to atone for the sins of watching that race with us, that you were able to at least make up for it by buying a classic Hot Wheels car. That's always a nice way of turning things around.
Well, the good thing about Formula E races being on a Saturday is if they suck, then you can go and do something else to get over it on a Sunday.
That is definitely true.
I think you might get more racing action actually running that 2000 GT across your floor.
I think you might be right, actually. Maybe I'll build a Hot Wheels track or something.
I don't think we got the official... I don't think this came from Formula E's official account when it came out, but I believe the official on-track overtake count for the race was 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
3?
It was 3, and still all anyone was talking about was, well, apart from traction control, which I'm sure we'll get to later, it was Dan Ticktum for once being completely accurate with his words and saying I think I'm correct here. There's a fucking barrier on the track because Degrassi crashed. I can't be arsed with this sport, something which I'm going to cut and use at some point.
I feel like we can all appreciate that quote.
Yeah.
In the aftermath of this event. In case you haven't noticed from all 3 of our reactions, it is going to be an effort to get a full-length podcast out of this race.
I literally said to the boys here, because I'm very candid about the behind-the-scenes process of this show. I often let in little secrets here and there. I said to the guys in here earlier, 30 minutes, we'll do well to get past 30. If we go past 40, I think we'll be drunk at that point.
I mean, in my day job, I'm a teacher and I'm a lecturer, so I can quite happily fill for 20 minutes talking about Sasha Fenestraz's Argentinian passport problem if you want me to.
Well, we'll break that out in case of emergency. Surely Diria can't be as bad as that, given we got 2 races to play with that weekend in a week and a half's time. But I've got a way we can pad a bit of time out. Let's talk about where you can find us real quick. We are on our website, motorsport101.com. If you want to follow us personally, you can. I'm on Elon Musk's failed investments and on Instagram at Dre Harrison 101. Cam is at cbuckley917. The show itself is on X at motorsport_101. And Sash, tell the good people where they can find you again.
Yeah, so I'm on X at Motion Racing Motion Racing Pod. I beg your pardon. But you can find the website motionracing.media, all one word.
Yes, yep. Give Sash a little bit of help from us. Does a fine job. He's expanding beyond. They're expanding beyond Formula E this year, and just having general stories about motorsport in general across the year. He's taking a page out of our book. How terrible! It's a terrible thing to do.
Looking forward to Daytona as well. It's going to have storylines, and I know I'm not here to talk about Daytona, but I've got to say, Daytona is the sort of line in the sand that says motorsport starts here for most people, and with or without Formula E, it's always been a favourite of mine, and I think it's going to start a new golden age of sports car racing. But we'll see.
I feel like that is a very used line that I keep saying every year, and then every year it just ends up being the same BS. So I'm going to hold off on that, but we'll hear more on Daytona and the sports car world at large in the near future from us.
Yes, most likely next week in the preview, in the run-up to the 24 Hours of Daytona. We're going to try and see if we can poach RJ and stick him in a recording studio somewhere in Florida for that, because he's flying down today as we speak to cover that. Best of luck to him out there. It's a week and a half. It's a fun vacation, if we do say so ourselves, but keep tabs on that in future. And hey, if you want to listen to that episode a little bit early, you can back us financially on Patreon if you like. Patreon.com/motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all of our episodes before they hit the public mainstream. And if you want to back us at the $10 level, you also get Supporters Club access to our Discord server, where you can listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, and you can see our faces, which I don't know if that's actually a benefit or a perk of the gig, but we try. We're a visual medium, partly, so you can check that out if you haven't already. Right, I've padded for time long enough during this episode already. Let's get into the Mexico City ePrix right after this.
Had a fucking barrier in the middle of the track as Degrassi crashed. Okay. Can't be arsed with this sport.
Cam, good news. Pascal qualified the damn car.
Oh, let's go.
It was a dominant display from the leading Porsche driver as Pascal Wehrlein led an almost lights to flag win from pole position to kick off the 2024 Formula E season. He did face some light battling during the attack modes with Envision Sebastian Buemi for second, with Nick Cassidy third on his Jaguar debut. But the race was largely criticised by fans for lack of action. Were they right? Yes. And how impressive was Wehrlein's win? Take your time, fellas.
So it was an incredibly impressive win. So something about Wehrlein always seems to light up in Mexico City. Maybe it's the fact that it's actually quite a nice circuit, I believe, to drive normally. That's debatable in the current Formula E car, but from the looks of things, the tyres were actually talking to the surface this time, so maybe that's still true. But thing with Wehrlein is he always lights up in Mexico City, a little bit like how when Crystal Palace go to Old Trafford, they turn into Barcelona. It's that kind of thing. The question is consistency over the season, as it always is, and I don't think we can always blame Wehrlein for that, because he's got caught up in some things, particularly last season, which really you'd have to say you'd have to put down to bad luck or poor qualifying or whatever. But I think, as usual, Porsche start off dominating,
Yeah, I mean, this is the third or fourth year in a row where we've seen Porsche come out of the gates just on fire in the opening round of the season. And last year, they were able to at least sustain it for a fair portion of the season. But we've been here before.
Yeah.
And it seems like Porsche have got their powertrain advantage back from, not quite from the start of last season, because obviously the other teams have moved on, but they seem to have found something over the winter, even with the homologation limits being what they are.
Well, I mean, for most of last year, they had an excellent car and race trim. What was more often the problem for the second half of the season is that, and especially the case of the works cars, they were giving themselves so much to do in qualifying that they would burn up that energy usage advantage trying to cut back through the field. When they can be out front and they can basically dictate the race, they're practically unstoppable.
And that we saw that with Da Costa. He had a terrible race, and it's not the first time for him at Porsche. And it just goes to show the advantage in Formula E, particularly in the current processional Gen 3 era, the advantage of actually being out front. And, Dre, obviously, I've known that you're the curator of the Church of Seb for a long time. Well, Sebastian Vettel got where he did at Red Bull because they were able to give him an amazing qualifying, and then he was able to execute. I'm not throwing any shade whatsoever on the guy, but had he had to start where Max Verstappen is, 15th or whatever, then maybe he wouldn't have got there.
No, that's a very valid point. Like Seb, part of what made him so great was that he was such a brilliant front runner. He was an excellent qualifier. I remember 2011, for example, he had 15 poles that season, and he'd often break out a 2-second lead on the opening lap, and then he was never seen again. That's what made him so good. He was just an exceptional front runner. And that's where Porsche is by it's weird. Formula E has this knack of no one wants to lead in this Gen 3 era because of conditions, the lack of being able to follow. And yet Porsche are at its best when it's able to dictate the terms of engagement. That's what makes them so strong. And
that natural energy usage that this powertrain can leverage.
Yeah. And I think maybe part of the reason why they were being probed so I was about to say probed so hard, my God, edit that one out.
We're keeping that.
But part of the reason why they were being probed so hard, and the FIA were being quite so anal about the possibility of traction control was because they just appeared to have by far the best package. But Jesus Christ! How many of these am I going to do? Sorry, that was unintentional. But so
make it a theme. Make it a theme. This is catering directly to our audience.
Yeah, Freudian slip. It happens.
Yeah, I mean, no one listening to this remembers Frankie Howard, but it's right. It's right there. But no. So I think the traction control probe, frankly, wouldn't have happened if they weren't so superior. But obviously there was a there because the evidence appears to be that there wasn't enough evidence that it was traction control. It might have been oscillation on the start. It might have been something in the software that wasn't intended to be traction control. That doesn't necessarily mean that there wasn't, if you know what I mean. It just means that they weren't able to, get enough evidence to apply a penalty.
Yeah,
it's equivalent. You remember back to the power unit row back with Ferrari in 2019, where we forget, but the power unit for Ferrari in 2019 was never actually declared illegal because the FIA couldn't prove it in a court of law. And eventually they just started throwing regulation changes at the wall to see what stuck. And eventually they did find something which actually Ferrari and Honda, and to a small extent Renault, were all caught in the crossfire of.
Yeah, for those who don't quite know, all the Porsches, except for Da Costa, was investigated after the race for a potential traction control probe in the throttle output of their cars. We actually didn't get an official result until about 1 a.m. UK time on Sunday morning to say no further action. There was nothing. There was no evidence to suggest that the Porsche had run foul of the rules. Because I did think it was quite funny that Wehrlein and Dennis, the two Porsche big hitters, were the ones that were being investigated after the race. Apparently, Nartos was settled in race, and yet the one with Wehrlein and Dennis had to have several hours of extensive checks taken over. Something FIA scrutineering, etc. I'm sure there's a joke in there somewhere about that. But yeah, no foul play. Wehrlein got to keep his win in a race that, as mentioned, had 3 on-track overtakes across its 45-minute runtime. And this was an extended race because there was 2 big flashpoints in it. We talked about Antonio Felix da Costa taking out Nico Muller for a clumsy dive bomb at turn 2. Da Costa, by the way, is getting a 3-place grid penalty for race 1 in Diriyah.
Well earned.
Of that. And yeah, well earned, I think, is the phrase we're looking at there. And the other incident was Robin Freins, who was clipped and put in the wall on the concrete. I want to say it was Sasha Fenestraz who he hit when Fenestraz came out of the attack mode zone. I was just like, what is this clumsy racecraft? It's just one of the things it's one of those, oh, this is why people don't take Formula E seriously sort of clips, or it's just like, come on guys, what are we doing here? Yeah, Freins put out of the race. Safety car came out. That's what led to us getting 2 added laps in overtime, which didn't really lead to much. Because, like I said, when you've put a giant front straight in Mexico City and then a not massively heavy braking zone afterwards, you're not going to have a lot of overtakes when the technical part of the stadium is so busy and you can't send it on anybody. And the last corner's a no-go either because it's a low traction zone. So where do you pass?
I think it is worth saying that this track has given us a few, if not classic, at least reasonable races. I'm thinking about Pascal Wehrlein's debut season or debut full season, where he ran out of usable energy on the line, and Degrassi took the win. That was a classic. There was also the first race in the Gen 2 era in Mexico, which I mean was probably most famous for Nelson Piquet Jr.'s massive crash. But it did actually produce a bit of a classic after that, and after everything was cleared up. So. Formula E's always one race away from a crisis, whether that crisis is due to boredom or due to too much happening. And it's arguable that maybe what the category needs now is to be taken seriously as a serious world championship. And you've got to say processional racing happens in every other formula. And this isn't to gaslight people out of thinking that there's a problem, because there clearly is. But I'm not sure this is the crisis that some organs might be making it out to be.
Yeah, I mean, look, I talked about it with guys on the server before we started recording. I enjoy Formula E's product overall for the most part. I think last season's races, the majority of them were good to great. I didn't think the on-track action was the problem. I think a lot of it was some of the silly off-track politics and some of the driving standards at times that were truly messy about it. But this is too far the other way. You're like you're not going to be able to take 16 races like this over a season if no one can overtake each other. I think the problems of the car was exacerbated by the layout and the dirty air effect of Mexico. I think it will be better in Diriyah in a couple of weeks' time. That track, again, generally produces good races for Formula E. But I do hear what you're saying, Sash, about the whole, is this a crisis? Well, I don't think so. But I try to be a bit more careful now rather than just condemning everything. Because we did that for MotoGP last year, Cam, and that was fun.
well, when MotoGP continues to be, a train wreck in slow motion, so I deserve it. Yeah, I mean, FE tends to... It's not like there's a set product right now with this car where some races are quite processional and some races are so insane that you can almost barely pay attention to everything going on because of the nature of the energy management. And I feel like at this point, the teams have kind of figured out Mexico City well enough. They know the best way to get around this is this track is to do what we saw this most recent weekend, which is basically just run a processional event. And that coupled with the fact that there's no air to make downforce in Mexico because you're so high up, we see it in practically every other category where cars just cannot pass here, whether they run short tracks or full tracks. And then this short track kind of eliminates two of your major passing spots from the full layout. It's kind of a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and come Diria, I think we'll see much more the shape of this season and what we can expect. But the lack of overtaking probably, as you say, Dre and Cam, won't persist. But I think what will is this sense of unease, which comes from other sources. I mean, if you're Porsche, then it's quite clear to everyone, I think, that they're taking a moonshot on winning it with the Works team this season. They will never admit this because they, as I said before, they pride themselves on customer machinery doing well. That's something they've always done as an organization. But I think they will have been slightly embarrassed by Jake Dennis and Andretti Global winning their title last season. And particularly given
on a corporate level, you know, a company like that is not going to care. On a team level, that's got to sting.
And I think that, you know, they're clearly taking a moonshot because if no matter how long they're in the building for, they will want that title under their belts because, well, for an organization as big as Porsche, it will feel like a waste like a waste of their time if they don't have it. And the concern is that with Formula E not getting eyeballs in front of the screen in terms of the marketing. Maybe this is just going to be a trophy for Porsche's mantelpiece if they win it to say, hey, we got Formula E, and something they can use in their marketing. I hope it's more than that, and I hope there are more manufacturers on the way. But the organisation behind Formula E has to do something because it's not just the racing that's at fault there. Can we cut in something about Jaguar as well? Because I did think they had a quietly impressive race. Obviously Cassidy was third, Buemi was second in the Jaguar powered Envision, Evans fifth, and I think that's them building a good basis for the season. I don't think it is just going to be the Porsche show from now on, and you know Buemi actually led some of the race, so I think all of us who predicted Jaguar to win something this season might not be completely wrong.
No, I think entirely fair.
I think what we saw, and obviously, again, one race, Mexico's kind of an outlier track, but on current form with the powertrains, it looks like you've got the Porsche and the Jaguar looking pretty evenly matched at the very front, and then probably a step back to DS, and then another step to Nissan and everybody else. Yeah, it looks like Nissan, again, just don't really have a raceable car. It's not too bad in qualifying, but they just don't have a lot to play with in terms of energy management in race trim. That goes for Nissan, that goes for the customers McLaren as well.
And it's a little bit sad to see ERT drop back behind Mahindra again. They look like genuine challengers from time to time last season. You know, particularly Tictum, not so much Sete Camara, who didn't start the race this time, but Tictum was dipping in and out of the top 6, top 10 from time to time last season. Never had
nothing like that this weekend.
Yeah, never had a raceable powertrain that would actually finish the race in those positions, but he was showing promise. I think this weekend will obviously be a write-off for reasons that we've explored, but it's difficult to see where they will go from here, given the limited scope for development through the season.
It looks like, and they talked about it a little bit, right, last year about making hay when they could. You know, benefiting from the chaos of a new car, because that's just the nature of new regulations. The second year of a given regulation set is usually when you see who's got it right and who's got it wrong. and how you develop your shortcomings from the first year. ERT looked nowhere.
Cheeks. And I can't be the only one. Just I mentioned Mahindra a minute ago. I can't be the only one to. And it feels like a difficult position to be in, to feel sorry for Nick de Vries, but I do. The guy went to Formula One to further his career. I don't think anyone can seriously blame someone for taking a chance based on one decent race and signing the contract. But he left, he left by a long way the best team at that time. Admittedly, they were going to be defunct at the end of that season. I'll start again. He left by a long way the best team at that time for the team that binned him, and now he's back with Mahindra and started at the back, finished 15th. I'm glad he's got that Toyota gig in WEC, because I would feel very sorry if this was a slow petering out of what has been a very promising career.
Yeah, it's coming back, brand new car, unfamiliar with, lack of testing time due to the pit lane fire that happened in Valencia's testing, and now he's with a team that had arguably the worst powertrain, or arguably it was the worst powertrain of 2022-3 season, and it's looking like that's continued here, which is just unfortunate across the board, really. That is a team.
Anything, if we go by this initial race, it almost looks like the gaps between the groups of powertrains have almost expanded a little bit, where the Porsche and Jag look like they're further out ahead of everyone. DS are kind of in no man's land, and then the gap behind them is quite large.
Yeah.
And really now, Mahindra and the ERT team have kind of just been reduced to back markers, fighting over scraps.
And I think we mentioned Porsche taking a moonshot earlier. I think it's a reflection of just how hard the big box manufacturers are trying to make this season count. The fact that Mahindra and ERT, who both teams who were challenging at the front in the early eras of Formula E, are not able to land a glove on them. I think it's a reflection of just how professionalized Formula E's become. But given that this was always meant to be the formula where things were equalized to help the racing, I feel like we've moved away from that with the new management team, and we maybe need to look at that.
This is more from a UK standpoint, because I'm the only Brit here on this occasion. The amount of fans that I saw lamenting the fact they couldn't watch this race because of the changes to the broadcasting, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. The fact that this was the first race on TNT Sports in collaboration with Discovery Plus, the amount of people I saw on Twitter say they were frustrated they couldn't watch this live. Which, don't get me wrong, you didn't miss much, but it's the principle that matters. It sucks. It really, really sucks. It feels like Formula E is going to lose a chunk of its English audience this year, no matter what happens, and that is really unfortunate. Because the series has got arguably its best following in the UK, and you've basically given your UK audience the finger. There is no justification to make UK, let's put it to you this way. For what you were offering for free and had the accessibility that came with your series, because as I mentioned when I wrote about it on our website earlier this week, which you can check out on motorsport101.com, when it was free and accessible, you can be a lot more forgiving towards things like the broadcast and some of the elements of it, because at least you always had accessibility. You could watch it on, because every major UK domestic free-to-air channel has a streaming platform now of some kind. Channel 5, Channel 4, ITV and the BBC, they all do in some capacity. So there was always a home, there was always a place you could watch the race for free in the UK. Can't do that anymore. You're either paying £30 a month to watch it live, or you're paying £8 for Discovery Plus, and you get the race a day later. What's the point of a live sports broadcast and going out of the way and watch it a day later? That sucks. There's no getting around it. That's not going to fly in 2024. So, good luck.
Nothing's going nothing's going to kill your series like taking away ways to watch it to the point where nobody can watch it unless they want to pay for it.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe I remember talking to formerly of your parish, Ryan Eric King, about this a couple of years ago. How it would make all the sense in the world, in my opinion, to for the FIA to have an FIA player where you can charge one subscription fee and get the same quality of streaming for all of their world championships, rather than having F1 TV and WRC player and WEC player. And his quite sensible response was, well, yes, but the European Commission stopped them from being a promoter many years ago, so they can't do that anymore.
I've said that Test cricket would have really done with something like that years ago as well. Like instead of all these stupid bilateral handshake agreements, you have Test cricket in a league form. You put everybody in one or two divisions so you can play Test cricket, and you sell the whole package off as a TV rights deal to the right broadcaster, and you can have all these Test matches you can watch online under one roof. And it's not, and then cricket's the same way. So I know exactly how frustrating that must feel, because there is the WEC, there is Formula E, there's karting I'm sure people would want to watch in certain degrees. There's junior series that people can watch under that wing because the FIA run Formula 2, 3, the Academy. There's value in that. But again, like I said, one, the European Commission won't let them do that, and two, private TV deals are still too lucrative, unfortunately. So, it actually kind of transitions us nicely into the last point I wanted to pull out here on our set list regarding the broadcast itself. Now, Cam, I don't know how much of this you actually watched in the end, because
I didn't see the race live. I saw the highlights, and I was told that was enough.
Yeah, you're probably fair on that one. I think me and Sasha did watch more of the overall broadcast. I know I did. Because, I am for my sins, I am a TNT Sports customer because of my EE affiliation and being able to just import the account over. I had it for MotoGP reasons, but having two under the same roof doesn't hurt in my case, I suppose. But Sasha, what did you make of that whole broadcast then? Because much was going to be made about Jermaine Jenas debuting as lead anchor and Whisper Films taking over production. How do you think it played out in real time?
So it felt like a step back to me. It reminded me a lot of watching watching the online DTM coverage a few years ago, because it was very disjointed. They were clearly trying, but they were clearly also running a conventional motorsport broadcast. So they would have a very intelligent person on the grid who would speak to a driver and ask them how they felt about the race, and then she would say, "And now back to the commentator," and it just made it feel like
jarring.
So it made it feel jarring. It made it feel like they were disembodied brains, if you like, who just happened to be working together, or like it was being done by AI. And this felt kind of similar in terms of, you had some of the hallmarks of the excellent broadcast team from the past, like Nicky Shields, for example, but. Yeah. But you also had people who were finding their feet. We've talked about Jermaine Jenas before. I've got absolutely no problem with ex-Nottingham Forest players wanting to do something in their second career. But the question is whether they needed someone who was a Formula E nerd on the staff hosting it. I thought UK Wrestling's Radzi did a good job last year, but what's the point in having a talent search competition if you bin somebody off after 2 years? But that is the way things go, 100%.
I guess 100%. I'm like Darren was perfectly fine as a presenter and could have easily grown into that role, and the talent search cut her. And look, she got to host the FI prize giving ceremony at the end of the winter, so I'm sure she'll land on her feet. She's in the circle, but I do find it frustrating that you made a big deal about specifically hiring a young, diverse presenter to add to your broadcasting team, only to let her go after 2 seasons to bring in a footballer. It's not a good look. There's no getting around that.
And like clearly, Whisper was the only show in town, as we said last time, and clearly TNT Sports was as well, because they don't seem to have put the race on Discovery Plus yet, even for UK subscribers there. So it feels like they are doing the bare minimum, and it feels like they've kind of said to Formula E, well, you can like it or you can find another deal, and those deals don't seem to be out there, unfortunately. I guess something else to say for it is I think new broadcast teams tend to sound a bit rubbish on their first time out, and they'll probably iron out some of the faults there. The unfortunate thing being one of the faults was actually David Coulthard, who didn't know anything about Formula E, and I don't know who there is being employed to say no and to bust egos a bit, because clearly someone's going to have to go to DC and say, you weren't as good as you thought you were, aren't you?
I'm glad you said it and not me, because I was going to make the exact same point. Like, overall, there are very good people on Formula E's broadcast team. Nikki Shields, I think, is a fantastic overall broadcaster. I think she should have been the one to be lead anchor of this at this point. She's a recognizable face. She's been there from day one. She's incredibly knowledgeable about the series. Why not just to make her lead anchor? And rather than keeping her in this either practice qualifying role or being a pit lane roaming reporter, it undersells how good she is. And it feels to me like they wanted a recognizable face from another sport to be their anchor and try the Jake Humphrey trick. Like, Jake Humphrey had bucket loads of TV experience hosting virtual bugs in Bamzuki before he got the F1 role in the BBC in 2009, right? Like, Jenas hasn't really got that. Yes, he's been a TV pundit, but it's a lot more difficult when you transition from being a pundit to being in charge of a live broadcast. And he had to lean quite heavily on Karun Chandhok, who obviously knows his stuff from a technical standpoint, and that's understandable. But like, it was obvious he had to lean on Karun pretty hard, and that's harsh. And look, I don't want to be too harsh in general, because Jenas will only get better. I have no qualms saying that. And look, live TV is fucking difficult. I know from many friends in this industry, in this game, and from many people who have talked to me about it, live TV is as difficult as it gets. You've got somebody screaming in your ear every 2 seconds. You've got 15 different things to concentrate on, and you've got to try and piece together a broadcast. That shit is hard. I don't envy him in that case, because I think it's the first time he's ever had to do that. But you've got people who have got experience doing that already on your team who could have made that role a lot easier. Nikki Shields could have done it. Radzi could have done it just fine. And like you said as well, David Coulthard just talked in cliches the whole weekend. Just, qualifying, it's you and the machine. And I'm just like, dude.
Thank you, Captain Obvious.
It's like, thanks, David. You're really adding to the insight of the broadcast here, and I think they've done well in keeping Tom Brooks. I think he's a fantastic lead commentator as well. I think he will do an absolutely fine job. Carrying on, because he had to fill in when Jack Nicholls couldn't keep his hands to himself, he's done a very good job since then, and more power to him. But you don't need to have David Coulthard in the commentary box alongside him.
Did it feel a bit to you like the old editions of Pro Evo Soccer before they got the commentary sorted out, where you get like where you get like Alan Smith or Jim Beglin coming in with, looks like two great sides we've got coming up against each other today?
It felt the pieces I saw from the highlight pack, it felt like pre-recorded bits of commentary smashed together.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like if you play any sports games commentary line. It's just a little bit too cliched, it's a little bit disjointed, and you could tell, because the thing is, right, like I said, live TV is uncompromising. You will get all those warts and blemishes times by 10. You can't clean that up on a pre-record and then clean it up afterwards, like podcasts are, for example. We never have to do that here, as is always in one take. No. But when it's live, you've got nowhere to hide. And
but I do want to give props to a couple of things though, and I hope that we've got time for any other business about the race as well, because there was some stuff I missed out earlier. But
any little helps adds on the time, I've got no problem with.
Awesome, because like Karun Chandhok, I've got new respect for, not just because of this, but because while down a YouTube rabbit hole recently, well, I had COVID over Christmas. What you do? I stumbled upon a re-upload of Guy Martin learning to drive a classic Formula One car and then racing Jenson Button. He had to build his own Williams car with Dickie Stanford. It was a great show. And Karun Chandhok was his driver training instructor. And along with this ex-sports car driver called Rob Wilson, who was tremendously funny to listen to. But Karun was just calmly sitting in the passenger seat saying, you might want to take a bit off the accelerator there, and never flinching, never panicking, and like Guy Martin was very clear. Karun doesn't mess about. He's done an awful lot in international motorsport, and he named some of the things as well. And like clearly the guy's a Swiss Army knife when it comes to broadcasting, because he can go from Formula One, from the touchscreen Gary Neville stuff that they do in the Skypad there, to propping up Coulthard in Formula E, and he can actually it takes some sophistication to do both of those things equally well, because Formula E broadcasting, as we found out, is very different to F1 broadcasting. So Karun might sound a bit bland at times, but I think actually that shows his skill, because he's processing so much information in a way that is never inefficient, if you like.
Yeah, that does take some doing. It's a hard thing to be able to do. It's something that I've had to learn how to do as a podcaster, where, I've not only have I played the role as being the host, but sometimes I've got to learn how to sit back and listen when I've had other guests on the show, or I've had to be on other people's shows and I've had to try and give insight while not trying to hijack somebody. I mean, shout out, I was on Engine Mode 11. You might know him as Dan. His podcast, The Engine Breaking, a couple of days ago. That's now out as well, if you want to listen to that. Talking about Gunther Steiner and the F1 pre-season. I guess it's a little bit of a pre-season filler-upper over Christmas, but it's a hard thing to be able to do both of those roles. I've got a little bit of TV experience, not much, but being as a pundit, that it's not an easy gig. So I always try to err on the side of caution when criticizing somebody too hard. I just felt overall like Whisper Films did a little bit too much of what North One did when they were producing the show. I feel like this was a bit of a missed opportunity for me, in the sense of season opener, and you are a British production company who are producing the world feed, and you also know that your biggest audience are going to be on a brand new TV channel for the first time. With that in mind, this should be a perfect time to reintroduce people to the series. Talk about the technology. Talk about the differences between that and Formula One. Talk about the teams and the drivers. You've got the second most talented single seat roster in motorsport. Sell that, and not just talk about the Jaguar Super Team, which came up about 3 times. Like they kept talking about Evans and Cassidy.
We talk about it here. We talk about it here sometimes, where we talk about how every podcast is someone's first. Well, everyone's racing season is someone's first.
Absolutely.
And there is no better time to point that out and to reintroduce people to the sport than a clean slate, a new season. Right. Especially when this season is going to be different to previous ones, given that this is now year 2 on these new cars.
Yeah.
The form book is a little bit more set than it has been, maybe last year. And yet...
And let's put it this way. I don't get anything extra on a broadcast by watching Karun Chandhok drive Jermaine Jenas round the track in a Porsche Taycan and having him shit himself. I don't get anything. It's a nice little entertainment trick to make it relatable, but I can't relate to a 740 brake horsepower Taycan being driven around the track. That's not in a Formula E car. It doesn't add anything to my knowledge of the sport. Talk about how good your drivers are. Talk about the moves. Talk about the fact that you've got unique technology which isn't going to be seen anywhere else. Talk about what makes you different from the other single-seat racing series you can watch out there.
Yeah.
You didn't do that.
I wonder if maybe they're missing the drive to survivisation of motorsport broadcasting, because, you know, while the F1 World feed has, in my view, quite sensibly not lent into any of the Netflix fiction making that happens every year, there are a lot of storylines which occasionally get brought up and mentioned, you know, without sort of any heavy slathering on of it. And Formula E has its own Drive to Survive. It's called Unplugged, and
Yes.
I believe it's on the Formula E website right now. But it almost feels like they're excuse the word, ghettoizing that by putting it there rather than using it as part of the broadcast. I feel like what casual viewers, if there are any left, want is to look at the personalities of the drivers, and you know, in a one-day race weekend, which is what we normally have with Formula E, you're not going to get that from interviews at the track. So I wonder if maybe some of the VT footage that they're using for Unplugged could instead be used during the broadcast.
Motorsport is a personality-driven business more than it ever has been. You know, you see the way that box-to-box productions generally has grown from Drive to Survive to tennis having its own series and Breakpoint, and the Tour de France got its own series. The Six Nations in rugby is about to have theirs come around very soon. There's been an explosion in sports docuseries. I remember Cam last week on our Discord was talking about Quarterback season 2 coming around pretty soon, and the NBA is getting its own version pretty soon. So with human beings, we will always find human stories the most relatable part of sports. That's what engages people. We've seen the evidence of this, and in particular in the last few years when the world stopped turning. We got more engrossed by that than ever. So maybe you're right, Sash. Maybe they are missing a trick by gatekeeping the series off to YouTube or their website, when maybe it should be better woven into the broadcasts themselves to get to know these people, because Jake Dennis is the reigning world champion. He's a fantastic character. He's engaging, he's open, he's honest, he ticks every British trope you can think of. And he's a likable person, but we would never have known that by watching him this weekend. He was barely mentioned all weekend. It was the Jaguar show.
But I think that's as much a reflection on Jake Dennis just having a really sad weekend. He qualified mid to lower grid and ended up sort of crawling to 9th, and it's difficult to get anywhere or to make up any positions, even with the Porsche powertrain in Mexico City with the Gen 3 cars behaving as they are. Still a sad opener to his title defense, and we tend to see drivers struggling in the early races of their title defense. I remember when Jev won season 4, came back in season 5. I think he barely scored a point for the first 5 races. Then got 4 or 5 wins in the next 7 or 8 races. So it is possible to make up ground, and you know, Dennis has shown it before. But he will have been hoping for better. The one reason I'm not feeling too worried about Andretti this season is, well, 2 reasons. Number 1, the Porsche powertrain. Number 2, they actually have decent backing for Norman Nato now, and they badly needed a teammate who could pick up the pieces when Dennis wasn't feeling it, or when Dennis needed help. And I think Nato will at least give them a second strain of data that they can that they always know that they can use, and that compares to Dennis's data. And also, you know, this is not a serious point, but I'm kind of glad that the crypto boys have left the car as well.
Yeah, that's always a plus.
I think we can all agree on that.
Certainly something to keep some tabs on as we get into the meat and potatoes of the season. As we mentioned, we've got 2 races in Diriyah coming up in a week and a half's time, which normally is a bit more reflective of the state of play. Maybe Mexico and the challenges that came with Mexico were unique to it. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. It normally does give a good impression as to what's happening. But with that in mind, I think we'll call this one a wrap on this occasion. We somehow went 50 minutes out of this, which is quite intriguing in its own right. I don't know how we pulled that off. We're alchemists here on this here on this podcast network, but we've been able to find a way to make it work. Like I said, we've got Diriyah coming up in a week and a half's time. That'll be one part of a double header of podcasts in a couple of weeks' time, because we've also got a preview of the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona coming up likely next week as well. So that should be fun. A lot of action to get us through the first chunk of, I should say the end of January, first chunk of February. So that should be fun to keep some tabs on. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed the show very much. Thanks very, very much for listening, and we will catch you guys very, very soon. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison. They've been Sasha Garlick and Cam Buckley. Until next time, sayonara.